I know. So, Dylan, thank you so much for accepting this interview and
Hello,
looking
nice to
well.
be here.
It's
Well, I
been
say I say nice to be here. I'm home for the first time in 2 weeks, so it's very nice to be here. But nice to be on
here,
this call
here,
with you as well.
here in both senses. Here in the sense that you're presential in the call, but also here, you're back home.
I love the thing that happens when you go to an event, and I often walk out. I'm like, "Hey, everyone, welcome to Stockholm," and then I'm like, "Except I don't live here, and you do, and I just got here yesterday." So, yeah, hi.
I mean, I remember one rock star story that I heard about. But I think it happened to David Bowie, where he would just show up to a concert and just shout out, "Good evening, Sutherland," and he was not in Sutherland. I presume that's never happened to you, right?
It hasn't, but I can
Okay.
absolutely understand. I've woken up many times and been like, all right, I know I'm in a hotel, but I can't remember what city this hotel is in.
Uh,
And you're like, where am I today? Oh, yeah, you figure it out. So,
I also remember one other Rockstar thing where you try to make it to stage and you can just get lost several times over.
oh, that's the Spinal Tap
Yep.
thing. But I love the like Spinal Tap is when the movie came out. Apparently, a bunch of bands watched it, and they're like, how did they know? Like, did anyone tell them that happened to us? And it's like, no, it's just it happens to all the bands. So, but actually, I've had a couple of technology conferences where it's not quite that bad, but like you arrive at the front desk and you're like, "Hi, I'm speaking at this," and they're like, "What?" And you're like, "There's a massive conference here. Like, there's 800 people." They're like, "We don't know anything about it," and you're like, "Does this building have another door?" So you go out and you walk around the block. You come back and you're like, "No, I'm definitely like, look, this is the invitation." Um, uh, and the best one I ever had was in Kiev, Ukraine, where there is
Mhm.
the Mercure Congress Hotel, which is called the Mercure Congress Hotel, which is directly opposite a Congress center called Mercure.
Ah,
And it doesn't occur to the people on the front desk that people might go to the wrong place. They're like, we don't know what that is. So,
I imagine there has to be a set of people who just accidentally come to this other Mercure and,
oh,
and
yeah.
ask for the real Mercure.
Yeah, me, hello.
Yep.
but uh,
But
But no, I've never been stuck in a like walking around and round and round trying to find my way onto a stage before. Yet. I'm sure
not
it's
yet.
only a matter of time. Anyway.
All right. Without further ado, you're being billed by Digitev as a technology strategist at Versatile.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean for somebody who knows nothing about that? And actually, furthermore, how would you describe yourself for somebody in your seminar who knows nothing about you?
So when you do an event like this, they always want a one-line description they can put on all the like the promo material, which if you're a program manager at Microsoft, kind of everyone knows what that means. You cannot really describe what I do in one line of stuff. So I was a developer for many, many years.
Mhm.
Started out writing, I was, hobby programming in the 80s, professional web developer from the mid 90s. And since then grown into distributed systems. I've built teams. I've done, architecture, recruitment. I was a CTO at a company here in London for a couple of years. Alongside that, I'm doing meetups and I'm doing conferences and I'm doing public speaking. And then I start turning some of my ideas for talks into comedy songs. And then some other speakers join me and we put a band together. And so, yeah, like, well, what do you do? Well, I will come to your conference. I will do a talk. I will hold panels. I will run workshops. I will teach people web and distributed systems. I will get on stage afterwards with a guitar and entertain everyone for a couple of hours. Yeah, it doesn't really fit. Technology Strategist was when I started my own consultancy in 2020. The people I was talking to were like, they like you can do this a couple of ways. One is you can go and work for a massive agency. Two is you can do like 6 months at a time, or you can work with people who they kind of want someone to come in maybe once a week or just connect with them periodically and kind of help steer them in the right direction and validate their decisions. And that's something when I was on the other side of that relationship, I worked with some people who I found their input incredibly valuable. Just someone you could kind of pay and go, hey, we think we figured this out, but we're not sure. We haven't really done this before. Can you come and validate our design decisions and stuff? And so, I thought, well, that's something I'd be very interested in getting into. The problem is then the pandemic happened and completely shredded everybody's expectations around how you go building a consultancy and meeting with clients. A lot of companies are like, we're not investing in any development because we think the world might be about to end, so we're just gonna and by the time that sort of blew over, I was basically doing training and teaching and speaking, enough that A, I was solvent, I was, making a living from it, and B, I was too busy to do anything else. So yeah, that's kind of where I ended up. And it's well, I say ended up, that's where I am now. I have no idea where I'm going to end up. I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. But Versatile is just the company I set up to have a proper corporate presence and accounts and all that kind of stuff. But yes, I am a one person company, which
I saw
that
that.
confuses the Americans. They don't know how that works. So
I feel like I have half an idea of how it works, but it does segue into an also. Also, is it okay if I take notes during this?
absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
you go for it.
So, because sometimes it might annoy people if I'm like looking towards the bottom right while you're talking. Like I have a set of questions, but it's free. I'm going free form. I'll ask them when they feel natural to ask. Tell me about your experience running Versatile so far.
Um, I like the fact that I almost never have a meeting, which I don't want to do. That is the
Hmm.
single best thing about working for yourself is I meet with people. Obviously, we have Zoom
Yeah.
meetings, occasional in-person meetings, but almost everything I do is like, this is 90% going to result in an actual useful piece of work for somebody. And I remember the number of hours every week I just spent in, oh, we got to have this meeting to decide who we're going to tell about this other thing that we're going to do in this other meeting later. And that is I think organizations at scale, it just becomes a kind of, it's like paying taxes. There is so much overhead to keeping everybody informed and to make sure that nobody feels left out when decisions have to be taken. And I appreciate that. And I also, appreciate that there are things you can accomplish with a big company that you cannot do on your own or as a very, very small team. But I enjoy the agility in every sense of the word of being able to juggle my own calendar. If something interesting comes up, I can shuffle things around and make time to be able to do it. I get to go to a lot of places, talk to a lot of interesting people, and yeah, it's. I'm not sure it's for everybody. Like I know people who got kind of laid off in the last big round of tech sector redundancies, and they're like, "Should I be self-employed?" And I'm like, are you completely relaxed about having no idea what you're going to be doing 3 months from now? And they're like, no, that would scare me. I'm like, probably not for you then. But you come around to it. So I think the other thing that helps me certainly is my last job disappeared because the company went bankrupt. And
Hmm.
you have all these safety nets, you have contracts and you have insurance and you have all, and then one day they're just like, oh no, we screwed it up so bad that you got nothing. Give us your keys and go away. And if we owe you any money, you can fill out this form and wait and wait and wait and wait. I'm like, wow, like paid employment contracts are clearly not the be all and end all that the world believes them to be, which was a bit of a rude awakening, but also, it's very liberating. Anytime you kind of get itchy feet, it's like, well, there used to be one company controlled my entire livelihood. And if that company stopped working, it went from 100% to zero. And now, I have 20 or 30 different companies I'm talking to at any one time. One of them goes under, well, that's all right. That's like a percentage decrease, so.
Yep. And it's a shame if they do go under, but you have many more other
Uh,
companies to work with.
yeah. Is it?
Depend. Well, it depends. Depends on how.
the pattern that I've seen time and again, smart people, they generally do okay. And there are companies out there that deserve to go bankrupt because they build horrible products and they treat people terribly. And they, if they were to move sideways and create a vacuum, somebody better might move in and solve that same problem in a way that is perhaps a little more sustainable, both, environmentally and ethically and all kinds of things. No, I absolutely do not think that just because somebody is running a company that it means that that needs to be preserved at all costs.
No,
I think we don't
I'm
talk
with you.
about this generally in technology. We don't talk enough about being willing to shut something down and walk away and say, you know what, this was good, but it didn't play out the way we wanted, or this just isn't working anymore. And shutting down products is hard. I
Yeah.
still upset about Google Reader because that was great and lots of people I know loved it and I loved it. And then they're like, no, and we're like, make it open source. They're like, we can't. Like Google's code base is a 1 gig monolithic code base. We can't like publish this bit. And they're like, really? Um, but yeah. So sorry, that's going off on a little bit of a tangent there.
I
But
love these
yes,
tangents. I didn't know about Google Reader. I feel like I must have heard of it though, right?
oh, it was. I mean, this is going back a while. I've been around a long time. So 2000 and there was this golden age of blogging, probably about 2008 to 2012, 2013, where like everyone I know started writing a blog and we all read each other's blogs. And I think it was, combination one, this was Web 2.0, the kind of, or the first wave of Web 2.0, where it became easier using, sites like Blogger and stuff to easily set up and start publishing your own content without having to set up Apache and build an FTP server and all this kind of stuff. But also this was before social media kind of hooked in. I think the interesting question is over the last 20, 30 years, you're at your desk and you got like 10 minutes free before you're waiting for something to go through the build pipeline, or you got 10 minutes before a meeting, or, whatever. What do? And there was definitely a period about 5 years when everyone I know would read blogs in those little gaps during the day. And then kind of microblogging, Twitter took over. And now, when I get 10 minutes free, I check Twitter, I check Slack, I check Discord, I check Telegram, I check WhatsApp, I check mail, I check all the things. And then I go back and I start at the beginning again because something might have happened. And so the sort of medium format of, writing and consuming blog posts. And it's a shame. I think we've lost something. I think that a lot of I think writing blog posts was an incredibly valuable way of, refining our written communication, getting good at writing, basically, and not writing a tweet or, writing a Facebook update, actually writing something, long form. And two, I like the fact that people owned their content. And the stuff you wrote, you owned it. It was on your domain or on your URL. And if you wanted to, you could take it away. And social media has fragmented that. And, it's I'm as guilty as anybody of, it's like eating junk food all the time because cooking healthy food is effort. And you kind of know it's bad for you. And you're always like, tomorrow I'm going to have a salad. But you know what? There's unlimited free cheeseburgers. I'm just going to have one more. And I think that's the way that we consume media online now. And the metaphorical cheeseburger companies, oh yeah, they know that. Because they're like, look how many advertisements we can print on the cheeseburger wrappers and make millions of billions of dollars. So
really free, but it's free in so much as you don't pay anything immediately.
It's not free. It's free in the sense that you don't have to pay money for it, which is the worst kind of free. So
yes. Yeah, I had several times I wanted to draw on right there, and I'm kind of unsure which one to pull on. If I may drag back to you, or also, but you have a blog yourself on your website, and I think it's a good blog, and that's you're keeping.
So it's actually, if you're going to look at my blog and you look at the frequency of postings, you can see the period I'm talking about, because there were like 2 or 3 posts a week for a sustained period, and then that kind of tailed off. And what I do now is I put stuff on my blog if it's something that I'm worried I won't remember later, because my blog is Google visible. So if I can't remember how to do something, Google can find the thing I wrote. Because I use Evernote and I use Gmail and I use various. I'm a searcher rather than a filer. Like all my stuff is in one big bag, and I trust that machines will be able to dig out the bits I need when I need them, because life is too short for filing. But so yeah, I tend to like blog stuff when I find something interesting. I'm like, I want to write this thing up. And I think like a lot of folks I know, you go through weeks where you're like, this week I'm all about the code, and weeks where you're like, no, this week I'm going out talking to people and doing events, and other weeks you're like, I'm going to blog again. That's it. That's what I'm going to do. That's my long-term plan. And so for about a week, you honestly believe in your soul that you are going to get back into blogging for another 5 years, and then the adrenaline, the dopamine wears off, and you're like, yeah, I'll do it later, and you find the next shiny thing and you move on. So, but yes, I still have a blog, and I'm one of my many things I'm thinking about at the moment is there a way to still maintain owner? Like, I want to be the primary source of all the content that I write, whether that content was written for a Twitter audience or a Mastodon audience or a Facebook audience. I want a way of saying, well, actually, everything is here. And then it gets kind of syndicated out. And, those kind of platforms, they hate syndication because they want to own it, because they want to be the place everyone does it. And, I have heard anecdotally, and I find this easy to believe, that if you put your content on a platform like Facebook, it gets boosted. And if you put a link to your content somewhere else, it gets unboosted, like it gets prioritized down, because they want to keep people on their platform. So So yeah, but yeah, that's one of the things on my to-do list, which is now about 28 pages long and probably exceeds my reasonable life expectancy. But who knows?
We might also invent immortality as well and lifelong energy, so then you get to
We
go this.
that would be fun. Like okay, I'll make that deal right now. If they discover, cheap sustainable energy and unlock the secret to human immortality, then I will stop posting everything on Facebook. There we go.
And then it's all actually yours.
And we got witnesses, right? You can all hear that I said that. So
I mean, we can also edit the interview selectively so that we can, or retroactively. Um, but I really do want to circle back on this
yeah,
talking point later. But going back to Rosatel briefly,
yep.
actually two questions there. One of which you may not be in a position to answer just yet, for because of the nature of running a company, etc. Number one, if you hear about somebody who also wants to become self-employed in the same way that you did with Rusatile, you mentioned that you also need to have a plan for what you're going to do with the company for the next 3 years or so. What else would you insist that they have in mind before starting?
Um, I think it is. I mean, the people I know who have done this successfully. I know a lot of people who in one sense or another, they run their own company, as in they are the director of a limited corporation that is established as a legal entity. Some of them just they do 3 month contracts here and there, and it's basically they do short term full time roles. And I know a lot of people that's a very popular model. And here in the UK, there's been some tax changes over the last decade or so, which have made that a little more complicated than it used to be. I know people who start actual companies, like they will start a company, they will go out, they will do, their first activity is sales. What do? We're a consulting agency who make websites. So first thing is we got to go and pound streets, knock on doors. Hey, do you want to buy a website? And they build it up from there. They hire some people, they grow that. I know people who they set up a company to run a single event. And so most of the conferences that you go to, certainly in the UK, there will be a limited corporation that exists purely to handle all of the finance for that specific event. So all the sponsorship money comes in, all the catering money goes out, all the ticket sales come in. So there's no kind of consistency to it. I think you gotta have a good idea about what you want to do. And for some people, that is literally, I want to establish a brand, I want to create a product, I want to grow it. And eventually I think the dream a lot of people in startups have is I want to get acquired. So I work really hard for 3 years, 5 years, but then at the end of it, there is a big payday. And I know a handful of people who've set things up and they have, I haven't seen them for years while they've been working on this thing. And then they get acquired by one of the massive, platforms or one of the big companies. And yeah, they do very well out of it. But for some people, it's a vehicle. It's if I have my own company, then I can explore the things I want to explore. Don't have things like non-compete agreements. I can work for what I want to work for and work my own hours. And if I want to travel, then I can do this whole sort of digital nomad, laptops in hotel rooms all over the world kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I'd say try it and see. Just don't break the law. I don't
Yeah.
think I think that if you want to succeed, you need to have a certain combination of drive and ambition and a network you can draw on to help you figure stuff out. I talk to a lot of people like, hey, I'm doing this and I don't know what I'm doing. I have a very good accountant who kind of say, hey, how do I pay for this? And they're like, well, you do this thing or you do that thing or there's this thing. And, I think that's the stuff. If you mess that up, you can actually get into trouble as opposed to just having no money or having no work. But there are lots of companies out there that are kind of just coasting along on a relatively small amount of turnover. But the people involved are doing quite well out of it and enjoying what they do with it. So yeah, but I am probably not a good person to talk to about how to set up your own company because I started from a very, very unique position, I think, of being
Um,
one suddenly unemployed, two already being at a point where people were approaching me about doing paid teaching opportunities and big network of contacts and stuff. And so yeah, get advice from lots of people as well as me if you're going to do
yes.
this. That's the one thing. Actually, if I could say one thing, talk to as many people as you can find and people who know you and can give you advice that reflects the particular situation that you're in. So
Yeah, that is actually that's very salient advice. But I also wouldn't say that you It does sound like you didn't, strictly speaking, start from nothing, but that doesn't make the fact that you set up a company any less impressive, in my opinion.
It's not hard to set up a company. You can do it for £15 and it takes 24 hours. Really.
In Estonia, yeah, I didn't know about the UK. In Estonia, it's also quite easy
Yeah.
from what I've heard. But
Is
then,
it Estonia does like a digital citizenship
yep,
scheme? Like
e-residency.
e-residency, that's the one. So it probably like wherever you are in the world or in Europe, certainly, you want to set up an Estonian company, it's probably just as easy. And boom, there you go. Now you run an Estonian company. So
Basically. But
yeah.
then there I think there are strings attached to setting up an Estonian company, and eventually you'd actually do have to make a profit of it
Yeah.
on it. My second question, to the extent to which, well, it's more about what Retail specifically does. So you mentioned it provides training
Mhm.
and development services. What more would you like to add to that description of versatile?
Uh it does what I do. I mean that fundamentally is the company is a brand that I set up, and basically I wanted something that people I know who want to book me for training. They're like, "Do you have something I can show my boss? Because we got your website, but that's full of a hairy guy telling jokes and playing the guitar." And I'm like, "Well, show them this. Let's set up a nice shiny present, like basically the digital equivalent of me in a suit
You, the
with
company.
yeah. And I've got a lot of interest and inquiries through that. One of the things that I get a lot of people asking about is communication training. And a lot of teams they've gone remote or they've gone fully distributed. They're trying to embrace asynchronous communication patterns, like how do we use Slack effectively, all these kinds of things. And it's easy, I think, for companies to just fall into familiar patterns that are not the most effective patterns when it comes to how they coordinate the work that they're doing. Classic example is people who you're on something like a Slack or a Teams account, and someone sends you a message that says, "Hey, got a minute?" and you don't see it. You don't see it for 3 hours
Yeah.
because of time zones, or you're at the park with your kids or whatever, and you get back and you're like, "Oh, well, 3 hours ago somebody wanted to know if I had a minute. Well, now I have a minute." So you're like, "Yeah, what's up?" And then they don't see it for 3 hours, and then just as you're going to bed that night, they're like, "Oh, I need to talk to you about a thing," and you're like, and say to people, look, this is not the telephone. This is a different paradigm that you need to get your head around. It is completely okay to message somebody and say, "Hey, how's it going? I would like to talk to you about this specific thing which has come up." And if you can ask someone a question that they can just give you the answer, then you don't need to chat. Because then when you get back, you can be like, "Oh yeah, it's here. Bang, there's the link, there's the answer, there's the thing you need." And you can unblock them, they get on with what they're doing. But I still see so many, people messages who they think it's like a phone call. They're like, they need to kind of get some banter going before they can cut to the chase of what they actually want to talk about. And this is just one of lots of different patterns. And so I put together a bunch of workshops and training material about how to kind of shake people out of their comfort zone a little bit and get them to think about ways of communication that are possible with distributed asynchronous teams, and also showing them tools you can use. A lot of people are like, "Oh, we got to go into the office because that's where the whiteboard is." It's like, no, we have digital whiteboards. You can do that distributed. Um, you can do collaboration, you can do backlog grooming, you can do all these kinds of things. Mind maps, brainstorming, all this kind of stuff. You can do it online. You just need to learn a new set of tools. But with developers, we love learning new things. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning, right? So, but yeah, in terms of where I uh, what it actually does, it is not certainly not a company at the moment that is going to be grown up into anything I'm planning to sell. Put it that way. There are various avenues. I had a lot of people are saying good things about the power of video training as a way of reaching a larger audience without placing. You do a 2-day workshop for 2 days with a group of 25 people. That's 2 days of your time. You reach 25 people. That's an end of transaction. You make 2 days worth of training videos. Now that takes a lot longer than 2 days because making high quality video is hard. A lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of editing. But then, you assume that material has a shelf life of a year, maybe 2 years. You can reach a lot more than 25 people. And if you can figure out the right approach for, monetizing that and getting a little bit of revenue every time someone wants some of your stuff, then that can be a very, very potentially very powerful long-term model. So yeah, that's something I'm definitely spending some time looking into over the next couple of months.
Right. That was
So,
actually a question I had that you about what more does Orstel have planned,
yeah.
and it does sound encouraging that you have no plans to sell. You're committed to this by yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so then going back a little bit chronologically down your
Yep.
timeline, I would like to ask you a few experiences about your time working as a professional developer in the 90s, going into your
Yep.
time as CTO in the last
Yep.
decade. So tell me experiences about that.
So, so I built my first web, or I wrote my first web page in 1992. And
Oh,
at the time, I was doing work experience. I was what 14 years old, and kind of wrote a letter to my mum had a friend who ran the computing department at the University of Bristol, and I wrote him a letter and said, "Can I come and do work experience?" Because we all did that as like a school thing. He said, "Yeah." And like that week, I saw all these things. Like I saw a Unix machine for the first time. I saw email for the first time. I saw FTP and Gopher and Vim and CD-ROMs and this thing called the World Wide Web. And, I remember sitting down one afternoon and writing up, it was just like the notes of some internal meeting, and they were going to publish them on a website, and like learning how to use Vim and how to put in, like, this is what, HTML 1 point, maybe not even 1.0. I mean, literally
very
July
good.
1992, the World Wide Web was 8 months old. And I kind of did this thing, and looking back on it now, I'm like, there can't have been that much stuff on the web. So somewhere out there on the 8-month-old World Wide Web, there was this one page of minutes from a meeting that I wrote, and it was out there. Um, and then, I kind of didn't come back to it for a couple of years. I got really into, I was going to be a mathematician at one point. And then I was going to be a guitar player. And then somebody said to me, the best career advice I think I've ever had in my life. One of the guys who he taught studio production at the college I was studying at. And his name was Rob. And Rob says to me one day, if you do guitars for a living, you're never going to have enough money for a computer. And if you do computers for a living, you can buy all the guitars you want. And the evidence is there on the wall
That
behind me.
is an impressive
Um,
selection of guitars.
I love guitars. Anytime you're miserable, go and buy yourself another guitar. And if it doesn't work, then maybe you actually have, serious clinical depression. But sometimes you just don't have enough guitars that day. Um, so then I went studied computer science. I did a year of doing desktop support,
Mhm.
as a sort of first job, and I loved it. I got, probably was I enjoy the craft of programming to an extent which can become unhealthy, because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm like, no, look, I can make it work. Just try this one more thing. And, I love that. There is a sort of, I guess, a dopamine response to it from the stuff I've read around it. It's like solving puzzles, and it can be compulsive. It can be addictive. So I did a computer science degree, and then in 2000, I got a job building, data-driven web apps or websites, with an agency based down in Hampshire in the UK, and got to build a bunch of sites for a whole bunch of different companies in classic ASP, mostly VB script, SQL Server. And, this was full on browser wars. Internet Explorer and Netscape were still jockeying for position. They had incompatible programming interfaces. If anyone out there listening or reading this remembers document.layers versus document.all, yeah, it was that. You had to write two versions of anything clever. But it was also, it very clearly, like, the web had the power to transform the world, transform the way companies operated. A lot of the work I did early on would be companies who were moving from, printed catalogs to online catalogs. And so, previously they're like, it would take us 6 months to create the catalog. We'd print it, and then that would be it for a year. And then we'd start working on the next one. So if we changed anything, we changed prices, we changed product inventory, we had no way of telling people about it. And, we had pallets full of glossy printed paper being driven around the world on diesel trucks. You come along and you're like, well, we can put this on the web and you can update it whenever you need to. And you don't need to print the catalogs, and you don't need to drive the trucks. And, there's a lot of ways in which that's revolutionary. And of course, there's also a lot of ways in which people were like, well, I work in the catalog publishing business. What happens to me? And you're like, well, yeah, sorry. And, publishing has not died. Bookstores are still out there. It's just that the books that get printed now are, nobody ever sat down to read a catalog of pneumatic machine parts. That was publishing by necessity, not publishing by any virtue of publishing as a platform. And so, yeah, I did that for a bunch of years. One of those clients, a company called Spotlight in London, eventually got in touch and said, hey, do you want to come and work for us full time? So I moved up there. I was when I joined them, I was webmaster, and it was so something probably interesting to comment on the difference between the people who work effectively at companies at different stages of their growth. And when I first started working with them, it was me and one other guy, and we did everything. Like we ran the Exchange server, we ran the server room, we built network cable, we fixed printers, we wrote HTML, SQL, JavaScript, CSS. Literally, like people talk about full stack development. It's like, yeah, unless you're shipping JavaScript on network cable that you built using your crimping tool, then you probably don't know exactly what the extent of the full stack is. So I, did that, and then that grew and grew and grew. The company was doing well. We hired people. Eventually, got to a point where I was, the architect there on a team of 10, 15 developers. And at that point, there's a point in the healthy growth of a company where the things which are important have stopped being exciting because they are business as usual now. And because they are important, they are bulletproof. There are processes and procedures, and you don't get to wing it anymore. And then there are things that you still get to, do spikes and research and development and prototyping. But then those things then have to go through checks and balances before they become customer facing. And, at that point, it got less fun. It was still a great bunch of people to work with, but the actual, business of doing it was like, yeah, maybe I could, move on from this and find something a little bit scrappier, I guess. And so I moved on from there. I started working with a company in London called Skills Matter, who were building their events company. So they did lots of technology events, lots of meetups. I had this long-standing existing relationship with them, and the mechanisms around their eventual decline are still unfolding. There are still lawyers involved, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. But yeah, 2 years of that, and then one day they're like, "We're sorry, there's no money left. You will need to give us your keys and go home." And boom, end of. So and they so the brand and some of their conferences are still actually up and running now. So and the funny thing about that is that the timing of it was such that a lot of people just thought that this was a events company that went quiet during the pandemic and then started up again afterwards. And so, which is I guess a convenient timeline for elements of what happened there. But yeah, so that was what finally gave me the push, and it was like, nope, I guess I'm just going to try and figure this out on my own. So
I see. Actually, the question I have about the collapse of Skills Matter is
yeah,
that, like, even if it wasn't, and it wasn't your fault, of course, that's
yeah, I don't think it was my fault.
yeah. I would say it wasn't, but even I mean, also I've been in the company that went
Yeah.
bankrupt, and that does kind of feel like a blow in the moment. How did you find yourself dealing with that blow, and how did you eventually come into the person you are right now, despite it?
Honestly, of all the things that happened in the 5 years between joining that company in the first place and today, that was just one more little detail. So many things happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually think it's, other than being the actual thing which kind of gave me the push to set out on my own and set up on by myself. I don't think there's anything terribly significant about it.
Okay,
It happens.
understood. It does happen way more often than you hear about. Okay, then going all the way back in time to when it started as a hobby in the 80s, tell me about
Yep.
that. Those sound like very, I mean, if putting it as a hobby makes it sound like an innocent time, but also a time of nostalgia. Tell me about that.
uh my father had an Amstrad 6128 that
Ah, cool.
came with Amstrad Basic and logo, digital research logo, and a couple of games. Like there was a chess game and there was a fighting, like an aeroplane game. And I I think even at that, like I would have been 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old, maybe. I was looking at that and thinking, I bet I can write better games than these. And it turns out that I couldn't because I was 8, and assembly programming on an Amstrad 6128 with no manual and no Stack Overflow is hard. But the thing that kind of got me sucked in was Logo, because Logo is a graphical programming language,
Mhm.
and it had this, this wonderful quality that it took long enough to do something that there would be an element of suspense. Like you'd type the commands and you'd press go, and then you'd wait just, maybe 20 or 30 seconds while it followed your instructions, which is long enough that you get kind of the suspense, you get hooked into it, but not so long you get bored. And so drawing little shapes and geometric patterns and figuring out how to do things in logo and functions, go over here and run this function, and then go over here and run this function. That was great. That got me absolutely mesmerized by this thing. And that's still, it's not logo anymore. Although I did a couple of years ago, I was doing Advent of Code on Twitch as a live stream, and I solved one of them in Amstrad logo running in a CPC emulator, which was fun. But yeah, it was just messing around. But it, I think, got me at a very young age into this thinking of the computer is just a machine, and anything that anyone else can make it do, I can make it do if I can figure out how they did it. And I think that the best developers I've worked with are the ones who are like, well, it can't be impossible because I've seen it working over here. We just need to figure out how did they make that happen. And the early days of the web would be full of, you go on a website, you'd be like, wow, how did they do that? And then you'd go right click, view source, take it apart, and you'd be like, oh, that's clever. Oh, they've made an image map out of an animated GIF. Okay, that's neat. And these kinds of things. Oh, they've got a JavaScript that does this. Oh, this is a Java applet talking to that thing. And I remember before it was called Ajax, when Ajax first came around, this idea that the browser could send requests from JavaScript. And I think Google autocomplete on Google search was the first thing that we went, how did they do that? And I was like, oh, wow, there's this thing. There's a COM ActiveX component in Internet Explorer that can talk to the server without you having to refresh the page. And that was just like, boom, entire generation of developers going, well, what else can we do with it? And then Google Maps came along, and you're like, they can drag the map and it just pulls down new tiles. And so you just infinite scrolling. And, that was a revolution in terms of building interactive user interfaces. But, we were always like, the only thing that the browser knows how to do is HTML and JavaScript. So, and we can write HTML and JavaScript. So if it can work on a web page, we can figure out how they did it. We can reverse engineer that, and we can build that on our own applications. And that was such a fun way to learn how to develop and deploy and add rich usability features, all this kind of stuff. And but I think it's that mindset of looking at any system and going, all right, well, somebody built this and they didn't use magic, so all we need to do is figure out the technology that was deployed to make this happen.
Just dig deep enough to figure out how.
Yeah.
All right. I also would like to touch upon your earlier point that there is now an exponentially growing number of developers. This mindset seems to me like one they could take on as well. The idea of these things aren't impossible. Someone else has done them. It's just a question of figuring out how to do them, etc. What else would you urge these developers to take on board as skills beyond knowing how to learn X and X language and stack?
I think the most important thing, I mean, I don't want to kind of be negative or dismissive, but the thing that I see missing in some of certainly the less experienced folks that I talk to is, I think empathy is maybe a good way of putting it. It's realizing that the software you build is going to get used by real people, and trying, do everything you can to understand who are they, what are they trying to accomplish? I give you an example that has nothing to do with software, but which is very much a factor in my life for the last 2 weeks, is trying to watch movies and TV shows that have been edited to watch on a big screen in the dark. There's this show Silo on Apple TV at the moment, and I was trying to watch it on a plane. I couldn't, because the editing on that show is so dark and so gritty that if you're watching it on a plane, you can't see it. You cannot see what's going on. And I'm sure the people who did the color grading on that thought they did a fantastic job. And I'm sure that, in a dark projection room, it looks fantastic. And I'm sure on your big screen TV at home with the curtains drawn, it looks fantastic. But, that's not where I don't get to take a projection room with me. I'm on a plane. I got a couple of hours to kill. I got no Wi-Fi. I might as well download some TV shows and watch those. And it's like, did you like, was this your intentional, like, we don't want you watching this on a plane, you should be watching this in a projection room? Or is this just, we don't care? Is this just, oh yeah, it never occurred to us? Because that's got to be like, the rise of streaming, the number of mobile devices, there has to be a significant proportion of media consumption now is people on public transport watching stuff on their phone with Bluetooth earphones. And it blows my mind. So I stopped watching Silo and I watched South Park instead. And of course, South Park is great because it's bright and it has colors and you can see everything that's going on. But there's a bunch of things. The Obi-Wan TV show, I couldn't watch that on planes. The Batman, the Robert Pattinson movie, yeah, I gave up on that. I couldn't see what was going on. So, and that to me, that is a lack of appreciation. That is somebody favoring their opinion of their own craft over the actual situation in which their users are going to be consuming or interacting with that product. And once you start looking for that, you can see little details and those kinds of patterns playing up all over the place. And that you're building something people are going to use. Do everything you can, find out who the people are. What are they going to be going through? I remember when the NHS, the health service here in the UK, had their whole registering all your COVID tests and that kind of stuff. That interface, I remember thinking they have designed this for people who don't use software very much. And even elements of designing this for I remember thinking at one point, how would I build a system for somebody who is having memory problems? They've got early onset dementia or something. These are the people who the health service has to include in their brief. And so this very gradual step-by-step login process, like almost to the extent of, hey, have you used this website before? Yes or no? If you have, do you have an email address? Yes. Okay, we're going to send you an email with a code. You put the code in, and very, very kind of step-by-step. But I can easily imagine the kind of people for whom they would find that process usable. Whereas if you just said, hey, username, password, remember me, accept cookies, bang, lots of people would be like, yeah, obviously. And some people would be like, I don't understand. What have cookies got to do with any of this? And so that I thought was an interesting example of something that I know some people found it frustrating. They're like, why does it take so long? It's like, because it's not built for you. It's built for everybody. And you are an edge case here. When it comes to, hotshot digital startup apps, you're the target demographic. When it comes to healthcare application for the 65 million people in the United Kingdom, the hotshot tech bros are the edge case because you're not representative of the target demographic of the system. So,
and then follow-up question: how do you, for example, in your work in your style, extend that and exercise that empathy?
Talk to as many people as you can and say, hey, can you show me? Send me a screenshot. Can we jump on Zoom? Can we do a screen share? Take any opportunity that you can to both, you want to listen to people because you don't want them to feel like you are dismissing their concerns about the product or whatever you're delivering, but also see if they can actually show you what they're doing. The one I went through with this recently was building an email ticketing platform for one of the conference companies I work with. And dark mode email. Who knew? Like, wow, you can put a thing on your iPhone and suddenly all your email goes white text on black instead of black text on white. And you're like, okay, really? And then you realize that the company logo that's used to brand the email is a transparent PNG. And so on a dark background, it's charcoal gray on charcoal gray. It's invisible. And, that I would not have figured out if someone, or rather, I would have got there eventually, but someone sent me a screenshot and went, is this right? And I'm like, oh, yeah. No, I get you. And then you're like, right, well, how do we fix this problem? And, that, I think, anything you can do to take opportunities to see what users interact with your stuff when they're trying to solve their problem instead of focus group type situations. but also anything you can do to take the other people who are helping to manage that system. So, your support people, your business stakeholders, product owners, anyone else that's kind of in that loop, give them the tools as well. So, if you've got like an intranet, have a thing on there. Hey, someone has a problem with their email. Well, you click here, you can see the same email that they got. And then you can see what it looks like for them. And you can see, oh yeah, this person has an unusually long name, and that is messing up the formatting. And now the ID number is getting pushed off the bottom. These kinds of details. And the more you can do to promote that understanding, I think the better a time of it everybody's going to have.
All right. Thank you so much for that hugely comprehensive answer. And yeah, I know some developers who talk about how that's the realm of UI and UX workers, but
Yeah, I think it's a necessary skill. It's something companies should take seriously, and it's something, there's a thing of consistency at scale, which I think is a big challenge that, certainly when you get up to, I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's joined a company who had a developer onboarding with over 1,000 new hires. And you're like, right, we got 1,000 people here. They're going to be building stuff that goes live. We're not going to trust even 1,000 smart, well-intentioned people. They are still going to end up with inconsistency because smart people solve the same problems in different ways. There isn't a right answer. And so that's when, UI and UX, but, I almost think that UI and UX done right is not about the user experience. It is about the developer experience involved in delivering the user experience. You can design a component library that looks fantastic, but really your target users of a component library are not your people on your website. They are the people building your website. They are the people building the forms. They're the people building your mobile applications. And so you almost kind of reverse the relationship. It's not like the UX people define the way the product interacts with the customer, and then the developers have to try and catch up. The user experience engineering is creating a pit of success that the developers fall into. That means when the product goes live, it works. And one of my great personal frustrations with the way the software industry works now is I used to build desktop applications when Windows and Windows Forms, and it didn't matter whether you built it in Visual Basic or .NET or C++, it looked the same. The buttons looked like buttons because Microsoft Windows said this is a button. And you never, ever had a meeting about what color the button should be or what font you should use on it, because they're like, no, our application will look like the other applications because that means that we are trustworthy and we are sensible and we are grown-ups. And the handful of people out there are like, look, our Windows application's got purple buttons. You're like, this looks like a child made it with crayons. And, it established this and Mac OS, the same thing. And one of the things which has always been I think a challenge with porting applications to Linux is not the underlying runtime, it's the lack of that consistent, harmonious desktop environment, because there are so many options to choose from. And, when we started moving onto the web, obviously there's, Bootstrap was a very, very influential library in terms of, but on the web, kind of it didn't play out the same way. Like your perception of a desktop application was, this looks like Microsoft Office, therefore it is credible and trustworthy. And on the web, it was, this looks like Bootstrap, therefore clearly they were lazy and didn't have enough time or money to do anything different, which I thought was a very, very kind of strange way that people's perception was shifted. But I guess the web has always been this sort of slightly weird runtime that's halfway between a marketing channel and an application distribution channel. And, I have an app on my phone that I use to do my banking, which is like, this is like my money that I need to move from here to here to here, because if I don't pay my taxes, I get in trouble. But when I open that app, it's like, hey, look, lifestyle experience. And I'm like, no, bank account. Like, I'm not here so you can sell me anything. But they're like, oh no, we got this number of engaged users. Let's use it to cross-sell and promote. And, that I think is has shaped the web to an extent that we are still trying to figure out. The cookie legislation a couple of years ago, where with, I think, good intentions, the European Union is like, you can't just stick tracking cookies everywhere without people's consent. And a few companies went, all right, we'll stop putting tracking cookies. But most companies went, yeah, you know what? We'll stick a banner in your face. We're going to track you. Do you accept? If you do nothing, that's explicit or implicit opt-in. And that could have been a serious, like, the European court flexing its muscles and taking big tech companies down for 4% of turnover. Didn't happen, and so it just made the web worse because we still got the cookies, but now we've got this stupid banner on every single website saying, do you accept cookies? And you're like, you know what? No, but we can't have that conversation because you screwed it. So I'm just going to say yes and get on with my day. So,
just to get it over with.
Yeah.
I do. It does occur to me that naturally there are some Chrome extensions where you can just disable those banners entirely and just set them all to I do not accept, but those imply more work for the individual, and most users aren't going to go for that.
Yeah.
So. But okay, logistical question here. How long are you prepared for this interview to go on for?
I penciled in for an hour, but I have no plans. So it depends. Okay. How long do you think people are going to listen or read it for?
I mean, it depends also what we do with this interview. If we decide to just edit it selectively, I think if it's engaging enough, people can tune in like they would for a podcast that lasts about an hour and a half. So should we say let's keep it going for an hour and a half maximum?
Yeah.
Right. Because also I have a lot of questions I would like to go through if you
that's cool.
For them. Okay.
I can give shorter answers if you like.
I love these long answers. So yeah, give me as much detail as you feel like is coming out of your heart in the moment. Hypothetical question. Let's say you are starting out in development as somebody coming out of university right now, and you are building up the skills to get your first development job. What skills would you prioritize working on?
So that's an interesting question. I still am a big kind of advocate of the philosophy that most problems can be solved with a relational database, a back-end programming language, and a working knowledge of the web. And I realize that that is not cool. And I know that, no, you should be using Cloud and Cosmos DB and doing this and Lambda and serverless and React and server-side React and all this kind of stuff. But, fundamentally, I think the important thing is to understand the point at which you reach the bare metal, but in this sense, there's a bunch of, let's take web browsers as an example. There's a bunch of stuff a browser can do. A browser can render HTML. A browser can render HTML using CSS to control the styling. A browser can run JavaScript and give you access to APIs like the Fetch API and location services and audio and video and Canvas and all these kinds of things. And because those are part of the API platform, I guess, that browsers provide, they change slowly. And, the things get rolled out, there's early access and then there's a window of a couple of months before it goes to production, but they will very seldom get deprecated. Once these things are out there, there are going to be a stable surface that you can address for a long, long time in your code. And so I think understanding that is significantly more important long-term than understanding TypeScript or React or, Angular, Vue.js, because fundamentally all of those things, they have to translate what they do back to JavaScript, browser API, CSS transitions, these kinds of things. Otherwise it doesn't work. There is no alternative. Well, there is plugins are dead. It used to be you could learn JavaScript or you could learn Flash or you could learn Shockwave or Java applets. Doesn't exist anymore. The age of the plugin has gone. Blazor is interesting, and WebAssembly, I think, is potentially interesting. But even then, a lot of the examples I see with WebAssembly, you're still manipulating the browser's document object model and interacting with those native APIs to make it do what you want. So, I think that there you have to learn JavaScript, CSS, HTML, understand fundamentally. If we take away all the tools and all the frameworks and we just give you a text editor and a web browser, can you still build something that works? And then, the back end, learn a couple of different languages, but understand that HTTP is about opening a network request and sending strings backwards and forwards. And all of the stuff we do on the web builds up from, hey, knock, 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 port 80, hello, I'd like to have a conversation, and the server going, hi, and the browser goes, hey, can you get me this URL? And you get something back. And the web, a REST-style API's GraphQL is built on top of this protocol. And then the thing on the back end, You're like, well, this needs to be something that can do network ports and strings, which really is all there is to it. So Ruby on Rails, yeah, we can do that. Python, yeah, we can do that. Node.js, hey, we can do that 8 different ways. And you're like, well, I don't know how to choose yet because I'm just getting started. So I guess I'll use this one. .NET will do that. Java will do that. All of these, back-end languages. I love JavaScript as a front-end language because it's part of the web ecosystem, which I think is amazing. I'm not a big fan of Node.js on the server side. One, because I think you should learn at least 2 languages. And if one of them's got to be JavaScript, then the other one should probably be something else. And 2, I like strongly typed, statically typed languages for, server-side stuff. C# is my favorite language for general purpose development. And then I think last you want to be like, well, how do I interact with data that survives when I reboot? File system, object databases, systems, Redis, CouchDB, MongoDB, RavenDB. They're interesting, but the relational data model has a sort of, I think, a timeless elegance to it that gets you thinking about how to look at your application in I guess 3 different perspectives. I think this is maybe the value you get from understanding that model, is that a relational data model makes you think about your application, your problem domain, in terms of relationships between atomic pieces of data. And then the backend platform makes you think of it in terms of behavior and modeling interactions between objects. And then the front end makes you think of it in terms of screens and user experience. And those are 3 kind of different perspectives, like, doing an end elevation, side elevation, and a plan elevation of the same building. They give you 3 different views on the way you solve a problem. Now, the corollary to all that is getting good at that stuff takes time. And a lot of people are like, right, I need a job now. I need to go somewhere that will start paying me money from day one. And I suspect from conversations I've had with lots of people out there that the best way to do that is to do a 12-week boot camp in whatever the framework of the month is, and then go to a company that is hiring hundreds of devs at a time. And at the very least, you'll be drawing a salary while you figure out you don't like it, or you figure out what you want to do next. So I fortunately for me, I'm no longer in the position of trying to find my first developer paycheck, and I realize that's a significant consideration for a lot of the folks, coming up or coming out of school is, I got bills to pay. I don't have 3 years to go and learn all these models and then come back and start looking. I need to hustle with what people are actually hiring for. And JavaScript, Node.js, full stack, there's a lot of interest around that. I think a lot of Python is another one, massive trends around people wanting to do Python and Python development. But there are also companies out there doing any language you can think of, with the possible exception of Erlang. There's not a whole lot of folks recruiting, junior Erlang developers. But, Java, yeah, you'll find companies need Java devs. .NET, you'll find companies needing .NET devs. Even like, Visual Basic, there's still companies out there who are like, it's not kind of cutting edge, but we've got a big VB app we need to maintain. Can you help us with it? So, yeah, but something that I say to people about how to learn stuff. I think let's use a musical analogy here. You can't learn to play the guitar. That's impossible because it is an infinitely flexible and nuanced instrument. And you could do 6 hours a day of guitar practice till you die of old age. And there are still going to be things that you don't know how to do, things you've never seen before, things you haven't figured out. But you can learn one song. And then you're like, well, now I can play a song. And then you can learn another song, and then you can learn another song. And then, at the end of, you learn one song a week. Then after 3 months, you got enough songs that you can get up and play a show with a room full of people, or you can join a band. You can go along to a jam session and kind of, groove along with that. And at that point, it gets fun because you're like, I'm making music. The music I like is coming out of my fingers now. This is awesome. And once you get that feedback loop of you enjoy what you're doing, it sounds good to you, maybe even sounds good to other people as well. And so you get a little bit of that kind of validation from an audience. That creates a feedback loop, which is going to make you keep going back to it and keep improving and keep working on it. And, I know some kids I was in school with who did music lessons, but they never learned songs. They just learned scales and how to read. And it's like, hey, you want to, should we start a band? Like 14, 15-year-olds. And they're like, yeah. And they come around and you're like, right, what should, and they're like, I don't know any songs. I'm like, what? How do you not know songs? You've been like doing piano for like 5 years. They're like, yeah, but I need music. I don't know. And it's, wow, okay. And yeah, I think software is the same. You can spend a long time learning theory and doing isolated examples, but unless you're actually building something that kind of scratches a real itch, then you're not going to get that feedback, which gives you, hey, this is cool. And build games, build a little game and then play your own game, build a website and put it actually on the web and show your friends what you did with it. Build little 3D applications. There's Unity out there now, which is like a cross-platform 3D environment that even I've seen stuff that teenagers have built in Unity. I'm like, this is cool. And you want something where you get to express your own imagination through the tools you're using, because then you start thinking, oh, I wonder if it can do this. Oh, I wonder if I can make that button so when I hover over it kind of wobbles a little bit. And so you find out about CSS rotation transitions. You're like, oh yeah, this is cool. Because I think that's what keeps people coming back. And so, if you're a developer, you have a bit of time on your hands, you could just go through all the exercises and stuff. But if you build things you like and show them to people and listen to feedback and build something else, you'll develop most of those skills along the way.
Yeah, without even realizing it sometimes.
Actually, just let me put one corollary on top of that,
Of
which
course.
is security. Because security is one of the things that it is almost impossible to figure out by building little applications yourself. Because, security, there is vulnerabilities and all kinds of things. It's very easy to write apps which look good and they work and they're great. And then you discover that there's a SQL injection attack or something. And when you built it, you didn't even know what one of those was. You just kind of hacked the code until you made it work properly. So I think, security is not necessarily you have to solve all those problems yourself, but be aware that that is likely to be a significant gap in your own knowledge if you're a self-taught developer. And make sure when you get to the point in your career when you are working on things which are important or have sensitive user data, that you got someone there to advise you on that and help you get that stuff right. So yeah, apart from that, play, have fun, build stuff, run it, see what happens.
Thanks so much for that really, really comprehensive answer. And I do like how there's an emphasis on learning the fundamentals first and prioritizing fundamentals above the very attractive TypeScript
Yeah,
React stuff, because the fundamentals will be what help you
yeah,
attain longevity across the development spectrum, and also like the emphasis on just creating things, see
yeah.
what you can do. Next question. So, out of all the emerging technologies and trends you can think of, which ones are you personally excited about, and which ones are you skeptical of?
That's an interesting question. Uh, I so let me, as a consumer, as someone who does things with technology, the thing that I personally can't wait for is consumer level augmented reality, not virtual reality, not the metaverse, not any of
Hmm.
that. I want to be able to put on a pair of lenses that I can actually see through, and I want to be able to walk around. Like I just got back from Athens.
Mhm.
And I took a couple of hours one of the days I was there, and I went up to see the Acropolis and the Parthenon. And I was walking around that place, and it's a ruin because it's thousands of years old and it's falling down. And they are taking work to preserve it. But I was thinking, imagine if you could put on a pair of Apple glasses or whatever they are, and you just tap a button, and there it is. And you can stand on top of that hill, and this fills in like, no, this is what the Acropolis looked like when it was a actual living building that people were having council sessions in every day. And you can just kind of look around and see and immerse yourself in this combination of physical reality and augmentation to give you this immersive experience. I've tried VR, headsets and Beat Saber and all those kinds of things. And I think the reason why it has yet to really take off is it's too weird. Too many people find the helmets are too heavy. The disorientation is kind of still a little bit kind of overwhelming for a lot of people. I put on a VR helmet at a conference last year to try out a skiing game, and I fell over because when you ski, the ground moves. And when you're standing in a conference booth, the ground doesn't move, but your knees don't know that because the sensation is so immersive
Yeah.
that you brace yourself for a jump and you lift your feet off the ground because you're expecting it to do this. Yeah, that was, and so that, that's something I'm really looking for. And I've seen, you look at the tipping points, like the two that I know a lot about, because, both I was kind of there when it happened, but also, I've done and researched everything that happened around this because I incorporated in some of my presentations. One's digital photography, because that was it was interesting, but no one was going to take it seriously. And it was for hobbyists. And oh, look, I've got a camera here that takes floppy disks. And, the Sony Mavica was beautiful, but it took terrible pictures. And then the Sony Olympic Games in 2000 was, I think, the point where digital photography, you had all these photographers who took the Nikon D1. It was like the first digital camera that took pictures good enough someone would put them in a newspaper. And because 2000, this was just the point where you probably could get like a dial-up modem in your hotel room. And, Sydney, we got photographers in Australia. So you've got a massive time difference and you've got a massive physical distance between the thing that just happened and the newspapers that want to run it on the back page. And so suddenly the industry goes, you know what, digital's good enough now, boom. And that, I think, the photography never looked back. And that was, a company like Kodak, who were absolute, multinational, almost a de facto monopoly, worth billions of dollars in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Suddenly they're like, oh, well, and they're like, well, you can make digital cameras. And Kodak is like, we don't sell cameras. We don't even really sell film. We sell developing chemicals to every pharmacy on this planet so they can make photographs. And that's gone. I sat down, I crunched the numbers on this one. So I worked out that I think Kodak was making 8 cents from every photograph that was printed on this planet until the 1990s. Because you look at the extent to which they controlled the distribution chain for the equipment and the chemicals that were used in reproduction, cost of film, the cost of development, and that's a business model got completely derailed. But digital photography is amazing. And you watch kind of cameras were getting better, and then suddenly there's this moment of right, let's do this. And the other one, of course, is digital audio, MP3s, which I remember the Diamond Rio, which was like, wow, it takes a compact flash card and it'll hold 128 megs of music, and everyone's like, this is a very expensive tape recorder. And also there was no legal way of getting MP3s, so you pirated them from Napster or you ripped your own CDs. So and then Apple came along with iPod, but also iTunes. iPod is everyone remembers the device. But what I think a lot of people forget is that suddenly there was a business model complete with label licensing associated with it, which made it palatable to the industry. And so there was bang, there was this sudden like, oh, this thing's amazing. And I'd like to think that augmented reality now is at the sort of the Diamond Rio, or if you ever remember the Apple Newton, like a little handheld computer with a touch screen, that it was bold, but it sucked because it just wasn't good enough. But it's you look at that, you're like, there were companies going, right, handheld computers with touch screens. Come on, one day this is going to work. Let's try it. Okay, that didn't work. The Palm Pilot. Okay, that was really cool. Yeah, it didn't work. But then finally, this convergence of factors came in. iPhone came out, and everyone's like, oh, yeah. Oh, now I kind of see what the Palm Pilot might have been, or what the Apple Newton might have been. And, I'm waiting for AR to get to a point where I guess you gotta go to a museum, you put on a pair of goggles from there, you tap a button, and suddenly you're like, wow. Like, I'm looking around and I can see what the statues looked like when they were new. And I can see actual like Greek senators walking around the place talking to each other. And that's the kind of thing you do that in a museum. You're like, how do I buy that for my house? And then you get the mass market thing. And then the mass market thing brings down the manufacturing costs. And then somebody comes up with, I don't know, whatever the equivalent of Tetris on the Game Boy was. And everyone wants one of these things. And then you just tap into all the stuff we can't even imagine yet that becomes possible with, ubiquitous augmented reality interfaces. So that's exciting to me because it unlocks a fundamentally new way of enhancing the experience of our daily lives by using technology in a way which just does not exist at the moment. A lot of the other things that are coming out, They're just different ways of putting pixels on a screen. And, we've, yay, ChatGPT. All right, well, cool. You got pixels on a screen. That's kind of funny. You got new ways of working with code. And it's not that I'm necessarily dismissing these, but I don't think they are going to be or I don't think the revolution is going to take the form that people think it will. I think that there's a lot of hype at the moment about, ChatGPT and machine learning and large language models and everything. And, I'd love to see, hey, you join a new company. They're like, well, this is our Copilot. Like, this has been trained on our own code base. So now it will help you figure out what code is already available in this company, which is, copyrighted and legally you're allowed to use it. And, we can identify duplication, fix all these kinds of things. All the excitement about what, the one I saw yesterday, people taking like classic photographs, paintings, and being like, yeah, make the painting bigger, show us the background. And I'm like, if Van Gogh had wanted us to see the entire street in Starry Night, he'd have painted the whole street. He picked that framing for a reason. Yeah, make it bigger, interesting, but it doesn't make it a better painting,
I mean, the framing was important.
Yeah. And, these so yeah, it's interesting. I'm kind of keeping an eye on what it's doing. I use Copilot for writing little scripts and things. But no, I think that the revolution, the really, really big impacts in technology are things that change the way, or like people who are not necessarily developers or early adopters, changes the way that those people interact with their environment, the way they communicate with friends, the way that they capture memories, the way they consume media. And AR is the one I'm waiting for to see what happens with that.
Right, for what it's worth, you got me excited about. I spent a little period investigating augmented reality and virtual reality programming. You got me excited about augmented reality all over again. And
the number of places I go. I live in London near a place called Crystal Palace, and there was an exhibition, like a world fair I think it was like 1850 or something, and they built this amazing, a guy called Joseph Paxton built a massive glass and steel exhibition center. No one had seen anything like it in the world. And then it was in Hyde Park in the center of London. And then afterwards they moved it here and the neighborhood became named after it. And then it burnt down. But the gap is still there. Like, you can go to that park and there is still this big flat area at the top where you can see the original foundations of the Crystal Palace. And I want to put goggles on and see what that looked like. That I would just love to be able to do. And, that is, no one is going to spend $100 million on Crystal Palace Park. But when they can do it for 100,000, it might happen. And that's the tipping point, That's where I'm, when you get to the point where, like, any local heritage anywhere in the world is like, hey, we can afford to hire some, some digital artists and some 3D modelers here to make this into an immersive, augmented experience. That I just think we're going to see a massive boom. Well, I hope, a lot of things could happen between now and then, but that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. I'm excited to know too. Thanks so much thanks so much for that really detailed answer again. I think I have two more questions left, and they are unfortunately comparatively boring.
All right.
Okay. First one does have like a little tie into the previous one, where when you're keeping tabs on all these emerging technologies and developments within them, how do you keep on top of all of it?
I don't.
Right.
I will be the first to admit there is stuff going on out there right now. I have no idea. But also, like, I remember 10 years ago, 12 years ago, being like, oh, I should really learn Silverlight. Oh, this is important. I'm a .NET developer working on the web. I have to learn Silverlight. Silverlight's really important. It's been a couple of years. I should probably catch up on that Silverlight. Oh, what's that? They're shutting down Silverlight? Oh, Silverlight, I guess I'm all right. And, that's not a lot of people built interesting applications in Silverlight. It has lived on because the core of the heart of Silverlight was the dynamic language runtime, which is the thing which eventually became the kind of the kernel of what became cross-platform.NET. And so it's not that it just got taken outside and shot. The technology evolved, but, any interesting technology that is actually legitimate, that has a real kind of credible advantage, it is going to move towards where you are. if you are a relatively mainstream developer who is working on, mainstream languages and mainstream applications, then you're going to move a little bit towards the exciting stuff, but also the exciting stuff is going to move towards the mainstream. So, and the stuff which turns out not to be that exciting is gonna,
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of years ago, Web3 and NFTs, and yeah, that I looked at it, I was like, I think I spent one day trying to buy a Kings of Leon NFT record just because I was curious about what that experience. So people are going, this is the future of collectible music, and I'm like, well, the past of collectible music is people going through bins of vinyl records in flea markets looking for interesting rarities and people swapping stuff on eBay. And I was thinking, the kind of people I know who hunt through bins at record fairs, are they going to be able to buy a Kings of Leon NFT? And after 6 hours, I could not. And I had, I needed to set up this, and then I had to install a MetaMask, and then this, and then I had to buy some. And I was like, this is not going to take off. Like, the only people who are getting any value out of this are the really, really loud people who are shilling it because they want people to put dollars in this side so they can sell their Ethereum and get out the other side because they know the whole thing's a scam. And, I tried very hard to look. There are some elements of this which are potentially nice, like the idea of smart contracts. So every time you sell a secondhand record, the original songwriter gets a little bit of royalty from that transaction. That is an attractive idea, but no, that's not the reality of it. And now, who gives a crap about NFTs anymore? Really? It's boom, bust, finish. Thank you very much. Some people made a lot of real money. Some people lost a lot of real money. Most people just went, yeah, well, I guess that's a thing that happened now. Yeah, it's don't feel like you have to keep up with everything. The things that are really important, either they will stick around long enough that you'll have time to learn them, or they will meet you halfway and they will become incorporated into what you do. I use Adobe Creative Suite applications a lot. And at some point in the last year, they added a button to Photoshop, which was how to export for NFTs. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm never clicking that button. I'm going to see how long it takes for the button to disappear. So, because I can't imagine that's going to stick around forever. Just like export to Macromedia Shockwave didn't stick around forever,
Yeah. Yeah. Or it might stay forever, despite the lack of need for it.
Yeah, at some point, someone is going to be like, really? Do we need to keep this? I hope.
Yep.
I hope somebody somewhere in the Adobe engineering team is like, nobody's clicked this button in 2 years. Can we remove it?
It would be smart then to simplify Adobe Creative Suite just by taking off the buttons that nobody actually uses. Okay, yeah, so thank you for that answer as well. And final one, which is probably what might act as like the promotional video for the seminar, if there's one. Well, number one, how much are you in a position to disclose about what your seminar will be about? Yep, that's actually the number one question.
So yeah, this is going to be Digit, which is in Tartu in Estonia. Why don't you have to remind me the dates?
I have the dates up somewhere. Give me a second, but September. It's
September.
21st of September.
And so I'm going to be presenting, doing a talk, but also delivering a seminar about communication and presentation skills. And basically, I've spent a lot of my career, a lot of my life, figuring out how to explain things. How do you take concepts around technology and turn them into narrative, turn them into a story that people actually want to hear? How do you support that? We have this wonderful landscape now where you can do a presentation with slides, you can use video, you can use animation, you can use audio, you can use props, you can use all these technologies. And, still I see so many people doing, bullet point lists in PowerPoint. And it's like, no. There are far more interesting ways to communicate what you're doing. And then we'll also be incorporating some elements about how to collaborate, which builds on some of the communication training stuff we were talking about earlier. And okay, well, you're doing a presentation in front of a live audience, you approach it a certain way. You're doing a presentation online for a virtual event, you approach that a certain way. You are meeting with a bunch of people on your team. Why are you having the meeting? What are the artifact you're hoping to get out of it? Is this keeping everyone in the loop? Do you need to make a decision? Do you need to come away with actions and a to-do list? This kind of stuff. And and it's going to be it's going to be fun. There's a lot of interesting material to bring in there. I hope and expect that we'll get a good group of engaged people who kind of actually get into the spirit of the thing. So it'll be interactive, a little bit hands-on, and
Cool.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be there in person, but if I'm there, I'm looking forward to it. If I'm thereabouts, at least. Yeah, and just to cap this up really quickly, if you could give and as a personal challenge also for you, if you could kind of give a really short, concise little bit of advice regarding presentation and communication skills for the seminar, what would you give?
Uh, oh boy, that's a good one. Tell a story. Stories work.
Okay, tell a story.
Tell a story, and if you can, tell a story no one else can tell. That is, I
That's
actually
it.
I got that from Hollywood. It's I can't remember who said it, but the quote was that every great movie director, sooner or later, they make a movie that no one else could have made. And so I say to people, if you want to be a presenter, sooner or later, you're going to have to give a presentation nobody else could give. And that means
Yeah.
that it's not just, hey, look at the technology. It's like, this is my story. It's where I came from. This is how I got here. This is why I care about this. So yeah, tell a story nobody else can tell. That's what you want to aspire to.
All right, that sounds like an amazing place to close the interview. Thank you so much for this.
Thank
And
you. It's been a pleasure.
all right, and I'm stopping the recording.